Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for another devlog for Dauphin, my 2D RPG about a marine biologist that I'm building with the Godot engine. I'm joining you today on a stormy Saturday morning, really the perfect kind of morning to sit down with a hot beverage and get some development done. It is a few weeks since the past devlog, as usual a bit longer than I'd like in between videos, but that hasn't been idle time. Apart from the typical bug fixing and tech debt stuff that I like to clean up between devlogs, I've been continuing to work on Dauphin's UI just to try and make it a bit more uniform looking and more readable. Hopefully some of that is evident here in the research log, but you'll also notice that I'm still struggling with particularly small text sizes with pixel art fonts. This is something I'll still have to work on in the future, but overall I'm happy with the improvements I've made recently. To kick off this episode, I want to continue briefly along that path and make a few more UI tweaks outside of the field notes that I think are going to be very important to Dauphin's general gameplay loop, and the first of those is the prompt that appears when the player approaches something that they can interact with. This interaction prompt is something you're going to see quite frequently while playing Dauphin. Every time you approach a door that you can enter, or really any interactable item like a piece of loot on the ground. When you approach an interactable item like this, you see an interaction prompt, which tells you what the interaction key is and gives you some kind of call to action, in this case just the name of the lootable item that you can collect. In my opinion, there's a few glaring issues with the way I've designed these interactions. First, they are in a fixed position on the screen, which doesn't always make sense based on where the player is. The text does not have any kind of outline or shadow, so it's very difficult to read. And I feel that once the player understands what the interaction key is, in this case E, for my current mapping, they won't need to see it every time they approach an interactable object. They'll just know to press E to interact with stuff. My current proposed solution for this is actually to revert to one of my previous iterations of the interaction system, which is to have some type of thought bubble over top of the player when they're close to an interactable object with an icon that kind of hints at what that interaction is going to be, whether it's picking up an item or going through a door. On top of that, I'd like to draw an outline programmatically around the object that the player is about to interact with, giving a more clear indication that an interaction is possible. That's going to be my starting point this morning. I don't suspect it should take all too long, so hopefully we'll be catching up very soon. Alright, joining y'all back after just about an hour here, and I think I have the first part of this refactor done. You'll notice that if I approach one of my lootable items here on the beach, instead of seeing the button prompt and the text, we now have a kind of thought bubble that animates quickly out of the player's head and displays an icon. In this case, the icon is meant to be a downward facing hand, indicating that the player can pick up this item by pressing the interaction key. Similarly, if we approach the fisherman's hut here and get close enough to the door, we'll see an icon appear that's supposed to look like a door opening, indicating that interaction will result in travel. I'd love to hear what y'all think about this so far, but I think it's actually a pretty good start. I think looking at an icon like this is much nicer on the eyes than text, and of course this is something we don't have to translate because it's language independent, so it should just be more accessible to have icons like this in place of the previous text prompt. I'd still like to implement a dynamic outline around the item that the player is about to interact with, but for now I think it's time for a break. Gonna grab some lunch and run an errand, and we'll catch up very soon. Hey everyone, catching up with you now here on Sunday afternoon. I had a really productive development session yesterday and another one this morning, so I'm excited to get y'all caught up. Right off the bat, some good news is that I was able to create an outline effect for lootable objects that the player approaches. So if we walk up to this fishing pole that the player can pick up, of course we see the overhead prompt that I've been working on recently, but now we draw a white outline around this object. And this is kind of nice because there's two visual cues here. The first is the action that the player can perform, and the second is what the player is acting upon. Kind of a nice thing, in my opinion, to have both of those pieces of information available, especially if you're near one or more of these lootable items in close proximity. You know exactly what you're going to get when you interact. The next enhancement, which is what I was working on this morning, was to improve the appearance of these items when they appear in the loot log in the bottom left corner when the player picks them up. So if we pick up this wacky rig here, you'll see that we now just have a nice visualization in the bottom left corner that looks good against all backgrounds. It's no longer just an icon and text. And I think this just goes along with the theme of making everything a little bit nicer on the eyes and a little bit more readable. This change actually uncovered one small issue which comes about when the player gains experience in a skill, which we can do by cleansing corruption from this tree here. When we gain experience in a skill, it's also shown in the loot log, and as you can see, these sprites are not reworked to be small enough to fit into that new UI. The quick fix here would just be to rework those sprites to be 8x8 instead of 16x16, but this got me thinking of maybe a better way to show the player's progress towards leveling up a skill. I'm going to draw from some of my all-time favorite XP grinding games and try to come up with a concise design that shows both XP just earned and progress towards your next level up. I need to spend some time with both design and development on this one, but hopefully we'll be catching up before too long. Hey everyone, joining you back here on Thursday evening. I was planning to catch up a bit sooner than this, but got on a roll with something pretty cool I've been working on, so I'm excited to show you. My goal over the past few days has been to come up with a more interesting way to tell the player that they've just leveled up a skill, besides the typical kind of dialogue interface message that you see here that I've been using so far throughout Dauphin. My first attempt at a solution here is this guy, which is a new scene I'm calling Level Up Toast. And quite obviously, this is just a fancier way to tell the player that they've just leveled up a skill. We have an icon corresponding to the skill here, as well as the new level that the player has just hit. And apart from just this kind of nice looking UI, I also have an animation here I can show you. Right after this will appear, we'll see a drop down here which will prompt the player to view more information about what they can do with their newly leveled skill from the field notes. In practice, I think this actually turned out quite nicely for a first attempt here. If I approach an organism over here and remove corruption from it, it should be enough to trigger a level up in my conservation skill, and we will see the toast appear, see the drop down, and after about 5 seconds the whole thing will fold up and nicely disappear. And this is just a small detail, but one that I'm quite happy with. Normally, if the player presses K on the keyboard, this will just open up the empty skills page of the field notes. But if we press K while this toast message is active after a level up, so when it's actually prompting us to view skill information here, as long as we press K while that drop down's there, we'll actually jump right to that skill page so that we can look at what we've unlocked. Overall, very cool progress on this UI, and I'm close to the end of the list of these tweaks that I wanted to make before jumping back into feature development. The last item for now is a new visualization instead of the loot log for seeing when you gain experience in a skill and how much progress you have left before you level up. I always think it's nice to see that progress on screen as you're playing so that you know it'll only take a few more actions to hit that milestone. Once again, I have to both design and build this, so hopefully we'll catch up one last time before the weekend. Hey everyone, welcome back to Tuesday morning. At the end of my last update, I totally forgot I was headed out of town to visit family this past weekend, so no time for an update before that. But over that weekend and yesterday and today, I have wrapped up what I was hoping to for the devlog, so I'm excited to jump in. So a couple interesting things to look at here, all that take place when the player accrues experience in a given skill. So to demo that, we'll remove corruption from an organism here on the beach. And right away, we'll see a few things happen. We have a little pop-up that shows us exactly how much experience we earned from completing that action. And we'll also see up at the top an indicator that shows us how much experience we have to go before the next level of that skill. I personally really like the way these two new UI elements turned out. I'm generally a big fan of being transparent with the player regarding how certain actions affect their pace of leveling up, and this way a player can make an informed decision of how to spend their time if they want to grind up a certain skill level during a given play session. I would like to hear what you all think though. Does this feel too redundant or cluttered, or do you like seeing all this info as I do? I think a good contrasting example to this approach is Stardew Valley, which is a game I love and actually has a very cool skill system, but it does hide most of it away behind the main kind of UI menu and isn't forthcoming about what actions give you certain experience. All in all, I think progress this week has been really good. As someone who loves leveling up in RPGs, it's exciting to me to emphasize this in Dauphin and make it feel more rewarding. As always, I want to give a huge shout out to the folks who support this channel and Dauphin's development on Patreon. Grammy supporters this month are Mega Ombre, Samuel SVD, Jess Sargo, Kyle Van Riper, Sergeant Bobby Bobowitz, and Sean McGuire. Beta supporters this month are Cody Odin, Vlad Sunny, Delius, and Universal Codex. Thanks for joining me this week. I know we mostly worked on UI stuff, which is not always the most fun, but with this knocked out, we are teed up to kick off a brand new feature in the next devlog, which I'm super excited about. So I'll see you then.